So,
Good morning. Good morning, Jarvis.
good morning, James. Good to see you.
Good to see you, my friend. Well, a special welcome. What an awesome thing to get to be with you guys all the way around the world. So we're on an 8, 9 hour time difference. So I'm having my Starbucks in the morning here, and anyway, it's great to see you. Hello to all the men. Like, just what an awesome encouragement you've been to us. So excited that you guys are getting going and that you guys are doing awesome things. So, pleasure to get to speak to you today. Well, Jarvis, you want to open us in a word of prayer, and um, then you can lead me in
Sure.
any direction you want.
Sure. Lord, we thank you for this beautiful evening, and we thank you for this beautiful fellowship of men that we're going to have. I call upon you into this fellowship, Lord. Just be with us all throughout and help us internalize the beautiful thoughts that we're going to share this morning. I just want to ask you to speak through the person who's going to share with us, James, who's here with us. Guide him, and may you use him to be your vessel today and deliver those beautiful words and messages unto us that will be of an impact to our hearts. We thank you and we place your name in Jesus' name. I pray. Amen.
Amen.
Gentlemen, I want to introduce you to James, the CEO or managing partner of NCS International. So thank you so much, James, for accepting our invitation today. Yeah, so the floor is yours. You have about 30 minutes of sharing, and then we take it from there. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, good to be with you guys. Yeah, it occurred to me that I am the CEO of the national office, we call it, but now because of you guys, I'm the CEO of the international office. So thank you. I guess I got a promotion just when you guys came around. So I'm thankful for you. Um, well, I want to just talk today a little bit about my own journey to NCS, kind of how some of those things came about for me. And really, I think my story is very common to a lot of people's story. And it's part of the reason that I'm really passionate about men being able to tell their story. So within NCS, I use the tagline a lot: tell your story, tell a better story, and be part of the bigger story. So telling your story is a lot about just figuring out where you came from, what were the cultural influences, family influences, educational things, what were some of the great triumphs and maybe some of the great wounds you experienced, just really coming to terms with who you are and how you got here. And then being open to sharing that and just realizing when you share it, you're never alone. And that I also say when you tell your story, there's a part of it that will always echo into the life of another man and his story. So our stories are sacred, but they're also meant to be shared as part of God's admonition to us through Paul, that therefore I'll boast all the more gladly about my failures and weaknesses, because when I am weak, He is strong. And I think that's a huge part of it. So certainly a huge part of NCS. So you tell your story, tell a better story. Usually, what that means is it's kind of like a moment of real influence in your story. It's a pivot point. For some people, it's actually coming to know Jesus. For some people, it's reconciliation with family or within marriages, or just a wave of forgiveness that they felt for something, of freedom in that. A lot of times for men, they'll tell me that that moment is really getting involved with NCS. That when they say they tell a better story, it's usually like, and then these guys came along into my life, which is really awesome. And then the third part is be part of the bigger story. And what that really is that you have to know your story and be honest about it to be able to move into a healthier story. And when you have a healthier story with great honesty, you're able to move into the bigger story, which is being used by God and understanding how he is redeeming this world to himself. And we get to play a part in that, often just through relationships. So NCS is something that's been going for about 20 years, founded by a gentleman named Jim Lane in his house in New Canaan, Connecticut, just outside of New York City. It grew and, really turned into something that just kept growing. God kept blessing it. And they had no intention of turning it into what it is today. That's kind of how it was going, and the Spirit was leading. I came along, found NCS in 2012 when I went to one of their big national retreats in San Francisco. And I walked into a huge ballroom of about 400 guys. I didn't know a single person. And I just thought, wow, I'm home. Like these are my people. I look around and I see people like me. And they were guys with real responsibilities and serious jobs and really trying to do right by their work, how they handle money, their family, being parents, all these kind of things. So that was a very impressive to me. And then I heard them worship, and I've never heard men worship like that. And at NCS, we call it worship like you mean it. And we lift our voices. And so I immediately just started to get involved. And then in 2014, I was approached by them to see if I'd be interested in coming on as part of the executive team to be their president and COO, and then eventually move up and take over for our founder when he moved on and up. So I did that in 2017, and so that's kind of about my journey with NCS. I'm married for 23 years. In fact, if it's July 3rd, in 2 days, I will be married for 24 years. The last 10 of which are a miracle, which you'll hear a little bit about today, just because my wife and I don't have the easiest story. I have 2 girls that are 14 and 12, and they are just wild animals. And I love that because they're strong women. And I think the world needs more strong women. So I grew up here in the mountains of Colorado. That's where I live. I grew up with a father who was very well known within especially Christian circles. My dad helped sell almost all Christian products, Christian bookstores around the country. So for me growing up, all the musical artists, kind of all the famous people that were around in the Christian circle were around my dad. And so I got to, we always kind of felt like, hey, this is really cool. My brother and I, we enjoyed that benefit a great deal. What I did not realize, it was creating in me a massive identity crisis because I didn't know who I was in this world. The situations that you guys have lived through, from what I understand, would create a similar dynamic where you have been thrust into being men when you were boys. And the extreme lack of male figures in your culture, based on your history and past, I think would just have a lot of really deep imprints in that. So in my situation, my father had a huge shadow, and I actually loved being in the shadow because there were a lot of perks. In fact, we often joked growing up that you didn't need a first name for my brother and I. They didn't care that I was James Anderson. That I was just Bill's boy. And like, hey, you're Bill's boy, right? Yes, sir, I am. And they were like, all right, well, come on, do you want to come backstage? You want to do this? Whatever. Well, that identity crisis didn't really hit me until I went off to college. Biola University is a Christian university in Southern California, in Los Angeles. And it was there that I started to study filmmaking, and especially screenwriting and marketing. marketing really in the idea of messaging and communications. And and then I went from Biola and also did most of my film work at USC Film School. Then I went into the heart of Hollywood. I worked for a film production company at Paramount Pictures and began kind of a journey of trying to see my dreams come true of being on the creative side of projects there. So I had written several scripts, sold several scripts, got to direct a movie, small $2 million film for Warner Brothers. And then while I was writing scripts, I had the opportunity to help kind of a mentor of mine buy a couple houses and a couple buildings in Los Angeles. And those are not light price tags. So I realized about 12 months later, I had sold somewhere around $46 million worth of real estate. And I kind of realized I was missing an opportunity. So I went into residential real estate on the coastal area of Los Angeles, some of the highest priced real estate in the world. And I began to use my messaging, my marketing, and the stories of a home to sell homes very effectively. The problem was I became very materialistic and I was very self-absorbed and I just became a jerk. And I realized after all of this that this was part of kind of the hole in me that came from not knowing what was important about having my own first name, is that when I needed to suddenly be James and not Bill's boy, I had to fill that with something, and I filled it with performance. I filled it with what I could do. I filled it with worldly measurement, materialism, power, success, those kind of things. And what that really led me to do is it led me to be unfaithful to my wife and borrow things from her and my family I can never pay back. It led to my wife and I being separated for 6 months. In which I really believed my marriage was over. And eventually it led me into a lot of counseling where I wanted to know, what is this thing that has so much power over my life that it drives me to do things that I regret or that I don't want? And there's something that's connected to me like a cord that comes out of me and into the wall, and it has power over my life, and I want to find it and I want to unplug it. In that process, I was able to save my marriage, which is pretty amazing. And by saving my marriage, I experienced the most costly grace and forgiveness I've ever known. When someone is saying, I forgive you, and I'll choose to see the best version of you in the face of things and offenses that just have deep wounds and hurts. So that really forever changed my life. It also made me evaluate who is the Jesus that I knew. And I knew a little Sunday school Jesus, and I didn't know the fullness of Jesus. I knew a pretty two-dimensional God, and I did not understand what God wanted me to understand about what he believes about me. And so getting those two things right was really critical in my own journey. But so going from there, I want to go back to my early career part where I was in film, and I was learning a lot about screenwriting and stories and things like this. And one of the things I learned early on is that almost every movie is built upon a very familiar, very common framework that's called the hero's journey. And it's based on Greek mythology. And sometimes one of these kind of steps in a movie will be a whole scene. And other times it's just one line, but you can go through and identify that they have an extremely common thread. And part of the reason it works is because it's very human. It's very much a truth about who we are and the kind of things that how we process what we go through. So I want to just share a little bit about the hero's journey, because I think it's a great model for NCS, and what we do. So again, we call it the hero's journey. And I think the first thing to understand is that the hero is rarely someone who comes riding in on a white horse with shiny armor and a giant spear or a thick sword who's going to slay everything. In fact, often the hero that we identify the most with is a very common person, and it's someone who is not equipped to be a hero. In fact, the only heroic thing they have to do is accept the situation they're in and the journey that will be in front of them, to whatever degree that is. So two really easy examples to see this is the original Star Wars and also The Wizard of Oz. So two movies, been around forever. I trust that many of you have seen them. But the hero's journey always starts with a normal person. They call him an ordinary person in an ordinary world. And then there is this thing called the call to action, which is the incident that occurs that starts the real journey in the story. And then they start down this path or journey. And so, in Star Wars, we meet Luke Skywalker, very ordinary guy living a very ordinary life. He's a farmer on a planet of sand. So I'm not totally sure what more you could do for him to be living a life without dreams and without passion. And he gets the call to action, which is him meeting Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's him finding these two droids that are causing trouble and leading him outside of his comfort zone. And that call to action is literally Obi-Wan Kenobi says, "You must come with me because I knew your father." And that's huge news to Luke. And it kind of, really tempts him. But he says, I have too much work to do here. I can't abandon things. I can't go with you. I'm going to be in trouble as it is. So here's this call to this journey that probably fits with his life and should complete part of his life. But he's too busy in the ordinary world to do it until he goes home and he finds the aunt and uncle that he lives with dead. And they've been killed by the very evil forces that is what Obi-Wan wanted him to go see. So just what's interesting about that is that he's taken out of his comfort zone. He's offered a bigger journey. He says no until he recognizes and is confronted with real evil and real darkness, real wrong. So now he has to go on to this journey. So he kind of steps into it and starts down this road. For a lot of us, what this is we're living the everyday life, and all of a sudden very non-ordinary circumstances happen to us. If you're like me, you might take some actions that are very much out of bounds, and you can watch your life sort of implode. And in that, you are able to see and recognize evil and wrong. And unfortunately, in this case, it was kind of a my doing. So I have to begin this journey that really is about finding wholeness and healthy aspects of me. All journeys in humanity, all journeys and stories are really people that are often seeking courage, they're seeking knowledge, they're seeking growth, they're seeking very healthy things that we take on the journey with us. For many guys, this moment of change and this recognition of evil or wrong is also something that just happens to you. So some people bring this on themselves. Some people, it just happens to you. So it can be anything from a loss of a job to a loss of a marriage to the death of someone close to you. it's all the things that just suddenly something is wrong, and it's just not right in the world. And then once you're confronted with that, you have to do something with it. So again, Luke now starts into this journey, and one of the second really most key things about uh, the archetype story structure is the very next thing that happens once he decides to take the journey is that he meets friends, allies, and mentors. So now he's suddenly um, he's got these two droids that have really unusual, like specific skills and ways that they help. He's got Obi-Wan, who's going to be kind of his guide and his mentor. And then he meets Chewbacca and Han Solo, and now is on the Millennium Falcon, and he's learning more and more about evil and about this thing that is out there in the cosmic universe trying to do damage and harm. The next thing that happens on the hero's journey is he's given tools and skills for a new journey. So, new things for a new journey. Again, very simply, he's given a lightsaber and given access to things like the Millennium Falcon, and he's suddenly learning these new ways to fight and new ways to do things. So that it's just a great example of how the journey sort of starts. In Wizard of Oz, even more plain and clear, the ordinary world is black and white, and she's on a farm in Kansas. And this tornado, which represents unrest and destruction, evil, flings her into the new world, the new journey, which now is in vibrant color. You have a yellow brick road, you have little midgets, you have sunflowers that sing, you have good witches and bad witches flying around. So it's very clear that she's now in the new world, taking a new journey. She immediately meets the lion, the scarecrow, and the Tin Man, all of which are searching for knowledge, a heart of courage, and bravery. And so those are things she wants and needs. They represent her own needs on the journey. She's also introduced to evil and the forces that will oppose her in the Wicked Witch of the West. And she begins her journey along the way. I think these are great examples of things in our lives that we can apply to ourselves. So I think for most people, they're living in an ordinary world, or not very long ago, they were living in an ordinary world. It's just the familiar. It's the things that we usually have control over. It's something very known to us, very predictable, and we have control, and therefore we have a lot of comfort. And then something comes along and severs that comfort and control, and things sort of spin out of control. We use the word chaos for this, and chaos can be issues in a marriage, issues in a job, a spiritual crisis inside of you. It can be the behavior of one of your kids. It can be things that are even more painful. But most of us are not your classic movie hero. We are just regular guys that are living a life, trying to do right by our families, by our kids, trying to do well in our job, to hold that job in a biblical sense, and just trying to do right. And then suddenly we are thrown into chaos. And really the only choice we have is to fight it or accept it. And in the story of Star Wars, both things happen. Luke says, I can't go with you. I have too much to do. I got all this junk I have to deal with. That might come out in our lives in a moment of chaos, of saying something like, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't think I can do anything about it. It's not my job. It's not my business. She's made her choice, or they've made their choice, or I'm not gonna coddle him, and I'm not going to approve of his behavior, even if that means he's going to go on his own way, whatever it is. Then when we accept the journey, when we recognize and see darkness, evil, wrong, we accept the journey. And often all that is really a step forward. It's really saying, all right, I don't know how to do this, but I'll try it because it seems like the right thing to do. It's just one step forward. And then in all classic stories, the very first thing that happens is you meet friends, mentors, and allies, people who are going to go on the journey with you, help you, and you'll be given new skills and tools and weapons for the new journey. It's very much, it's a great metaphor for life. And I'll close with just a couple quick things. In those moments of crisis, all we have to do is step forward, very much like the prodigal son, where the only thing the prodigal son really had to do was stand up and decide to turn and go home. It was the only requirement for him to change his life and change his story. There's an amazing verse in Isaiah 42:3, which in part of my own journey was very meaningful. But it says, a smoldering wick he will not snuff out, and a bent reed he will not break. And what I learned about that verse a little bit is that a smoldering wick is one that cannot have a flame, but all it really needs is oil. It needs fuel. It needs to be in contact with the fuel that will create light and fire. And that there's nothing wrong with the wick or the lamp. It just needs to be filled up. That's a lot of us. It says a bent reed he will not break. And a bent reed is one that's it's had some sort of trauma. It's been hit. It's been knocked into, brushed against, battered, wind, storm, whatever. And it's broken at some point. And that's also a lot like us. And one of the truths is you can't take that reed and stand it up and fix it. That actually the only way to strengthen the reed so it will stand straight again is from the inside. Like it has to have the nourishment that it needs to be healed on the inside, given the strength to stand upright on the outside. Both of these are just unbelievable pictures of Jesus and what he does for us. That truth was a huge part of my own journey in realizing that there was nothing wrong with me. I just wasn't in contact with God the Father, Jesus' grace and mercy, and the purpose of what they offered me. I realized that my outside was very broken and it couldn't be fixed externally, but it had to be fixed internally. And that was something I just couldn't avoid. But I could have fought it and just said, you know what, I guess this is just how I am, and I'm going to be broken, and I just need to find someone who will accept me. That's the refusal to the journey. What I realized is I'll do anything to figure out what's driving me and be healthy. And my wife deserves that, even if she doesn't stay married to me. And my 2 daughters deserve that because I'll always be their dad. And frankly, I need to just fix what I know is wrong. That was me stepping into a journey I didn't understand. And again, immediately I was given mentors, friends, and allies along the way. And I was immediately given tools, weapons, and skills, new things for a new journey. And it's been a huge part of the last 11 years of my life. So I'll finish by another promise that God makes us. It's actually in Isaiah, also in 42, but it's down in verse 16. But it's something I absolutely love, and I think it just tells us a great deal about kind of what God is willing to do for us. So In Isaiah 42:16, God says, I will lead the blind by ways they have not known. Along unfamiliar paths, I will guide them. I will turn darkness into light before them, and I will make rough places smooth. These are the things I will do for them because I am their God and I will not forsake them. In our lives, somewhere, we've all needed leading because we were blind. We were all essentially walking on unfamiliar paths. We all had darkness that we needed to be given light and be able to be shown what we're trying to do, what we're trying to walk on. He says, I will make the rough places smooth. Like in my life, that was the most important part of my transition. And it's a lot like a river where just rough rocks fall in, and over time, just small sand and small, the current of water and just the environment eventually turn it into a smooth river stone. And God closes with the promise that these are the things I will do because I am your God and I will not forsake you. That's a promise that has meant a great deal to me. And I'd like to think in NCS, we are all on a journey that is uncomfortable, probably because we didn't necessarily choose it. It's unfamiliar because we don't have control. And it's also never meant to be taken alone. And I believe that's one of the great gifts of NCS is we equip men within authentic friendships to take journeys that are difficult internally, spiritually, mentally, sometimes dealing with past, to be healthy and then be able to tell our story honestly. And that story will honor God because, as Paul says in Romans, therefore, when I am weak, he is strong. So anyway, Javis, thank you so much for letting me share.
What a beautiful story. Thank you, James. Just one question that I wanted to ask you. Like, would you just walk us through what you call like the spiritual disciplines? How do you keep, that depth with Jesus? What are the things that you do throughout the week or the month? Thank you.
For me personally?
Yes, for you
Yeah.
personally.
Well, I have a great fortune of the fact that almost all of my job is dealing with Christian men talking about real things. That's not true for most people. And so it's a big part of like the blessing of my job. So for me, the very first thing starts when I wake up in the morning. And when I wake up in the morning, I do not get out of bed until I feel like my mind is in the right place. So this comes out of a lot of different kind of aspects. It comes out of any 12-step program, which is really like, how do you want to frame your mind to frame your day? And so for me, in my past, the start of a day was basically a great challenge to do something that benefited me, was good for me, and kind of work to build the empire of James. I feel like in my life now, the beginning of my day is preparing my heart to check my ego and have humility because I have a big ego that can show up. And it's also to realize that the purpose of today is to give myself away for someone. And I love to be able to identify that person at the end of the day and say, today, here is who needed me. And I could have been too busy, too arrogant, or whatever to see it. And I love keeping a little journal of those things. Then I start, once I'm up, I start to look like this. I then, I go downstairs and I have one spot where I love to read in our house. And I read one of several things. It kind of depends. I like to sort of choose something and take it in like a bite-sized journey. I love things like I have a book a year with C.S. Lewis, just little things. I love the Jesus Calling is another really great, just daily verse and kind of a thought meditation, something like that. Um, or I have one of several of those. Or right now, I've just committed with my 14-year-old daughter that we're going to read, starting in the book of John, but we're going to read every day for 60 days as a challenge to each other. Um, and so that's what I'm going to be doing next with her starting tomorrow. So I do those kind of things. And then for me, I think the spiritual discipline is really just it's just listening, I guess. And then it's maintaining that humility throughout a day where like it's easy for me to be like, what is happening? Why is this coming to me? Why are people throwing this on my plate or blaming me? Or why is this person upset? Like, what have I done or whatever? And like I can feel that rising up in me. And it never gets that's never healthy and never goes well. And so hopefully 95% of the time I catch that before it lands somewhere. um, I've committed to praying a whole lot more. That actually my first thought, rather than okay, what can we do about that, my first thing is to just say, all right, God, man, just landed on my plate here, just hearing this news. Don't even necessarily know how to pray for it, but I'm positive you're in control of it. So help me see what you're doing and help me know what to do. Give me wisdom, whatever. It's just 10-second, but just to throw that there, that's something really I've been working on. That's, I think, a new discipline. I try to be the first person to say sorry. I think if you're a man like me who's experienced costly grace and someone showed you unmerited mercy and forgiveness, then I better be the first person to offer it, because it's one of the few places that Jesus says, I'll measure you with the same stick you use. So I'm a man who's been forgiven much, and I feel like I need to be a man who is quick to repent, quick to say sorry, and quick to offer forgiveness. And then finally, I don't go to bed without kind of evaluating my day. How did I do? Did I spend my time, my energy, my resources in things that matter? Is there anything that looks like James's old life? And if so, that needs to direct tomorrow morning and how I start my day there. So
Thank you so much, James, for me sharing.
my pleasure, man. It's not a pretty story, but it's a great God story. And so I don't want people to leave any interaction with me saying, "Oh man, what a great guy," or "What a cool dude," and that kind of stuff. I want people to always leave with an idea of like, what a great God that has changed that guy into who we just met. Like that's what I really want, for it to be his story, not just my history.
Maybe one last very question is, could you just give us a perspective where NCS is at the national level? How many chapters? How many, what are you seeing? What's the move of the Lord? And yeah.
Yeah, sure. Let's start with the easy, which is kind of the numbers. So again, NCS was started a little over 20 years ago. Single chapter, grew from like 8 guys to 200 guys, and then all of a sudden somebody said, "I'm moving, want to start a chapter here." Somebody else said, "I want to start a chapter here," and it just began to sort of grow. We currently have 64 active chapters in the U.S., plus we have Uganda and Rwanda, and the incredible things God's doing over there with you guys. I just have been talking to someone in Dubai and Sydney, Australia, London, and shoot, I'm forgetting one. Anyway, but it's like suddenly this thing is starting to seep, just like it did from our founder's house in New Canaan. It started to seep into other places. And now this is starting to seep in other places of the country. In a lot of ways, because of like early NCS men who are now older, who invested in younger men, much like you, Javis, in your story, coming through Mike Timmis and Ed Russell and some of the gentlemen who have been pillars for NCS for a long time. So we currently have 64 in the US, 2 overseas, and 3 more that are interested in coming online overseas. I have maybe 13 chapters that are in the process of actually coming into a formal NCS chapter. So they heard about it, wanted to start it. They're doing something, and they want to kind of get it going. So it's pretty amazing that in 20 years gave us 64 chapters, and that in the last year and this year, there's a really strong chance that we'll launch 20 new chapters. And it's a pretty amazing testimony to God's blessing and leading. But it also speaks to the needs of men and just how much the last year has affected all of us. Because we were suddenly sort of stripped away from all normal life, relationships, friendships. And I think it also exposed for men how flimsy and cheap their friendships with men were. And so it's just easier to talk about a game, talk about work, talk about whatever, and never really get into like what's really going on. And suddenly we were all living the same experience, the common experience. And that led, I think, to a huge need for NCS. And suddenly men are like, I can talk about it because it's everybody. And I think it just made the door really wide for guys to walk in and be honest, which is surprising to me because we ended up all being virtual. And NCS has always been what we call an analog organization, where it is about face-to-face, shaking hands, being able to hug somebody, put your arm around somebody. And we went entirely digital in this last year, and the results were completely unexpected. And again, you can just credit that to God saying, I've got a plan. I'm going to take care of it, but I'm going to use NCS the way I need it. We also added a little over 3,500 guys last year, brand new to NCS, from all around the country. So we have a little over 26,000 men on our email list, and that are paying attention, reading emails, whatever. Many of them may not be going to the chapter meetings, but they're listening and they're paying attention. And last year we just realized like 3,500 guys came out of nowhere, and that led us to realize the need was there. Those guys were having that experience. And it also just really demonstrated God's leading and blessing. And we also saw that of those 3,500 guys, a lot of them are not near a little red dot where we have a chapter. So if we've got guys spread out all over and they're not near a chapter, what can we do for them? How can we connect them in community, give them a chance to engage? And so, yeah, it's been a surprising year. And I don't know that anyone could have predicted, obviously, the pandemic. But if you said, oh, by the way, 13 months after the largest global pandemic and world shutdown, we've seen in many lifetimes. NCS will have grown. NCS will be thriving and vital. And if somebody had said that, we'd have been like, you're crazy. And yet, how God has used us, grown us, and given us a special place and purpose in the lives of men, I think is very important.
All right, thank you so much for that. Yeah, we could end our recording.
Yeah. All right. Great to see, well, to be with all of you. I appreciate you guys, your heart for your community, what you're trying to do, the passion of the leaders, and just, I don't know, it is our sincere prayer that God will use this opportunity and bless you guys. And it's also our sincere joy, like just to see, my goodness, God took a seed and he threw it all the way across the ocean into Uganda and Rwanda. And so it brings me great joy. It's great to be with you. And I just want you to know I appreciate you guys. And we are here. We are NCS United, even though we are divided by a long ways. So great to be with you guys. Have a wonderful, wonderful week.